I'd like to encourage you to be turning with us to the 10th chapter of the book of Revelation tonight as we continue our study in this book. Tonight in the 10th chapter, we're going to be talking about the little scroll or the little book. The presence here that we have is another interlude. Like the one that we saw back previously here in chapter 10, we have another interlude between the 6th and the 7th trumpet. Now, this brings some tension and anticipation. You know what John has shared with the people who were struggling so desperately under persecution. He was bringing to light that, yes, those that are persecuting you will be dealt with. And it gets a little more in depth as we go through the Revelation. But this should be an encouragement to those Christians in Asia Minor. And again, we as Christians today, when we face persecution, we too can be encouraged to know that God will not leave us to our own device. He is always there. There were the ones who yearned ardently for relief, and in this book, God's providential care is promised, and the fate of the faithful is explained. 6 of the 7 trumpets, as we just noted a moment ago, have been sounded. Now we have this interlude intervenes as John discovers this little scroll or book. I like the word scroll best, but others like the word book, so I'll use both. Found in the hand of this angel. Look with me in Revelation chapter 10, going down to verse 1. Revelation chapter 10, verse 1. It says, I saw another strong angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book, which was open, and he placed his right foot on the sea, and his left on the land. And he cried out with a loud voice, as when a lion roars. And when he had cried out, the 7 peals of thunder uttered their voices. Now, we understand as we studied back in chapter 9 that 3 woes had been promised. And this is down around verse 12. It talks about those woes. Well, with the sounding of the last 3 trumpets, these woes were made manifest. Now we're waiting on this, I guess we could call a conclusion. But here in chapter 10, these verses are intended, like the interlude earlier between 6 and 7, or the 6th and 7th seal, to reassure the saints that the gospel is not destroyed by the revelation of these things. The gospel is still out there. It's still doing its work. John sees in this another mighty angel or strong angel descending from heaven like in a cloud with this little book or scroll in his hand. Now, the amazing noisiness of Revelation returns the angel's shouts. And it's with the sound like a lion's roar, very loud. We've all heard those kinds of things on tapes. It was that which was full of power. It was unmistakable. It is a noise such as God used to announce judgment to the wicked. In Jeremiah 25 and verse 30, and also over in Amos 3 and verse 8. And it answers by the figurative voices of 7 thunders. very loud. In Jeremiah chapter 25, going down to verse 30, it notes, "Therefore you shall prophesy against all these words, and you shall say to them, the Lord will roar from on high and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He will roar mightily against his foe, and he will shout like those who tread the grapes against all the inhabitants of the earth." In essence, judgment is coming with a powerful manifestation. In the book of Amos, in the 3rd chapter, going down to verse 6, it says, "If a trumpet is blown in the city, will not the people tremble?" The trumpet noted here in Amos and other places in the Old Testament dictate that which was used for calling the people together as a warning. It's kind of like we used to hear, I don't know if we do as much anymore, but when we have tornadoes, the tornado siren, have you ever looked at one of those old tornado sirens? What's it look like? It looks like a trumpet because it gets people's attention. In this day when the trumpet was blown, sometimes it was because of invasion, danger. Continuing in verse 6, "If a calamity occurred in the city, was it not the Lord done it? Surely the Lord God does nothing useless. He reveals his secret counsel to his servants and prophets. A lion has roared. Who will not fear? The Lord God has spoken. Who can but prophesy?" Again, this realization that God is going to deal with Rome. He's going to deal with the struggles that these people had. Over in Job 26:14, it says, "But the thunder of his power, who can understand?" The angel is standing here, has one foot in the sea and the other on land, indicating that he has or that he represents one who has total authority and great power. So you need to listen. Something's going to happen, and you need to pay attention. The entire description indicates that he was a very special mission. It was important. And verse 1 tells us that he came in a cloud. This word cloud, used 25 times, occurred in the New Testament. In all but 3, it is used in relationship to deity or the divine appearance, often in judgment. It was going to happen. Now, we have to remember that these Christians in Asia Minor was still going to suffer through some terrible persecution, but the Romans wasn't going to get away from it. And remember, the Christians, the faithful, they had the stamp of God on their foreheads. God knew who they were. The angel was clothed for a divine spiritual mission. Here in verse 43, we find the word rainbow. And this is the only time the word rainbow is discussed in the New Testament. And I can't remember. I believe the rainbow has 7 colors in it. But y'all have to check on that and find out about other rainbows and their colors. In Genesis 9, it talks about the bow designating the rainbow. And then in Ezekiel chapter 1 and verse 28, it gives us the description or a definition of what the word bow is used to represent in that context. So we understand from Genesis chapter 9 the promise that God gave us not to destroy the world with water. And that's why he put the bow in the sky. And again, go over and look at Ezekiel 1, verse 28, where you find a definition or an illustration of what the word is denoting. So again, we see that this angel is on a divine mission of special importance. The children of God, those that have the seal on their forehead as God's children, they're going to be all right. God's made a promise. But yet, they still have to live in this world and face the struggles of this world. The little scroll or the little book is just one word in the context. It denotes something like a booklet, something that is not large, it is small. Verse 2 denotes that it's something that is open. It's knowable. John's going to be able to understand it. He's going to be able to read it, and he's going to be able to put it into action. This booklet has not been sealed. But now there's going to be some of it, as we will note, that's not going to be put out there like public information, for using a better word. The little scroll, the book, is the commission to John. It represents, it represents both the message John is to relate and his responsibility to relate the message. And when we get down here in verse 9, where it tells him he's going to have to eat this book, it's noting that John's going to accept this responsibility. He's going to do what God denotes for him to do in this. The angel calls out in a loud voice like a roaring lion. Again, we think about this passage in Jeremiah 25. God called his children in Hosea 11:10, and he did so with the roar of a lion. In Joel chapter 3 and verse 16, God roared so that the heavens and the earth shook. In other words, pay attention to what's going on here. We need to pay attention. This angel wanted everyone's attention. He had a message from God. And this message needed to be heard and heeded by all people. This was not something that was just off the cuff. It was something that they need to pay attention to. Now, when we think about the seven thunders, we recall that thunder and earthquakes often accompany God's judgment. Now, the judgment on the Romans is only a third. It's not a complete destruction. It's only that 1/3 is going to be dealt with. So it is a partial thing, but it is an extended thing, but God's judgment is coming. Thunder was heard during the plague of hail in Egypt in Exodus 9, and it accompanied the appearance of the Lord at Sinai in Exodus 19 and 20. God used thunder as a weapon against the Philistines in 1 Samuel 7 and verse 10. And Job perhaps put it best in Job 26:14, but the thunder of his power, who can understand? This was a powerful thing. So the use of thunder. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this depiction here, the seven thunders, in a general sense, is noted because it is symbolic of God's perfect judgment. The seven, God's perfection. Thunder, judgment. So this is going to be God's judgment against those who persecuted his people. In verse 4, in Revelation chapter 10. It says, when the seven peals of thunder had spoken, it was about to write. I was about to write, and heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up the things which the seven peals of thunder have spoken, and do not write them. Then the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land lifted up his right hand to heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things in it, and the earth and the things in it, and the sea and the things in it, that there will be delay no longer. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished, as he preached to his servants, the prophets. Now, this clap of thunder would have been something that gets your attention. And it notes here that as little children, sometimes it's a fearful thing. And I guess, according to some, thunder is clouds bumping together. But I don't know that I believe that. Because I was always told that thunder was a tater wagon rolling over. And I know what it is, because needless to say, it is a brief expansion of the air because of an electrical current going through the air and making lightning. Is that kind of basic? Is that as basic? Yeah, that's pretty basic. Anyway, but when we think about God's judgment, it's something that we need to be fearful about, because God's judgment is not always that pleasant. The thunder here is meant to attract attention and signify justice. John is about to write what the seven thunders stated, but he's stopped by a voice beyond the angel in heaven. Now, in essence, it's not time for those outside to understand about the judgment that was coming against the Roman Empire, the Caesars, all of those. In this section, like a witness would rise in a courtroom and take an oath of honesty, so this mighty angel prepares to swear by the witness or by God's witness. In other words, what I'm telling you, what we're talking about here, God's going to do it. This is not just something that we're saying. It's going to happen. The pronouncement of judgment by the seven thunders was not to be revealed at this time. Later, John is told not to write that down, what they said. For some reason, God chose not to reveal everything about the coming judgment against Rome at this specific time. But we'll see some more as we continue on. It was sealed up for the same reason that Daniel was given in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 26. It says, the vision of the evening and morning which has been told is true. But keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. And the judgment on Rome wasn't something that was instantaneous. It took a while for everything to come to fruition when we think about what went on at Rome. When the angel lifted his right hand, this was done usually when taking an oath. The raised hand signifies that what is being done or said is taking place in full view of heaven, and emphasizes the solemn and momentous nature of what is being said. It's important. Listen. A more solemn oath could not be imagined, as the angel swears by the eternity and the omnipotence of God. Don't worry. God's going to take care of this. He's got it under control. The angel swears that there would be no more chronos, and that's the word that's used there. Now, chronos means time. You know, like your watch, chronos, chronographer, chronograph, those kinds of things. Well, some would use that word, and that's why I'm pointing out this word, to note that this is talking about the end of the world. It's talking about time. But the word chronos can also denote time not delayed. And that's what we're talking about here. These noted Greek scholars that is listed here tell us it means the delay. So this interpretation also fits perfectly with the context and the time frame given elsewhere in this book. These things are sure to come to pass soon. Goes back to the same idea that we've seen. It's not something on 3,000 years down the line. It also fits perfectly with what the angels actually said, and it fits perfectly with the description of the 7 trumpets in 11:14. Behold, the third woe cometh quickly, or comes quickly. Thus the mighty angel stands on earth and sea, raises his hands, and swears before God that there will be no more delay. The suffering that Rome is going to incur is going to happen. In the 7th trumpet and the 7 bowls that follow, a complete judgment of God against Rome will be fulfilled. What right does anyone have to insert a delay of 2,000 years and counting? And we see that a lot with people out there who are misapplying the revelation. So this was a solemn oath. There was not going to be a delay, and he was appealing to the eternity and the power of God and proclaimed no more delay. This was coming to pass. In verse 7, it notes, but in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he is about to sound, and the mystery of God is finished, as he preached to his servants, the prophet. Mystery is not that which is unknown, but denotes that which is revealed. So it's going to be revealed. The mystery of God is finished. It's going to be revealed. So what is the mystery of God that was announced to the prophets? Well, this mighty angel is swearing that the mystery of God to redeem the world through Christ Jesus, which was foreordained from the foundation of the world, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 20, would be finally and completely fulfilled without delay. It's going to happen. From that point, no one could ever say, as did Paul, that day shall not come except, but rather could say the day can come at any time. It's going to be a fulfillment. They're going to deal with this struggle. Let's look at verse 8 through 11. Then the voice which I heard from heaven, I heard again speaking with me and saying, Go take the book which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel, telling him to give me the little book. And he said to me, Take it and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. I took the little book out of the angel's hands and ate it. And in my mouth it was sweet as honey. But when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And they said to me, You must prophesy again concerning many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. Here it sounds a little strange to us, but he was commanded, instructed to retrieve the open little book from this strong angel. But when he asks for it, the angel tells him to eat the book. Now we saw that back in Ezekiel chapter 2, chapter 3. Go back and look at that at opportunity. In essence, it denotes the idea that he's going to do what it says. He's going to know it. And he's going to make application for it. This is, as we noted, recycled imagery meant to communicate certain information to the saints without detection from the opponents among Caesar's forces. And remember, they were the ones that were causing a lot of the struggles and the troubles, especially when Domitian comes along. So John was to fulfill himself, or to fill himself with the book, a figure for mastering the content of the little book intellectually and spiritually. He had to know what this book had to say. He had to make it manifest. The message was sweet like honey in his mouth, for he was a servant of God, and its principles applied to him spiritually and supported his hopes religiously. The same message, however, proves to make his stomach bitter. So the sweetness of this was that God was going to deal with the problem, and the children of Israel were known, not the children of Israel, but the Christians were known. They knew who they were. They had that on their forehead, that stamp. So it was sweet that God was going to deal with this. Now the bitter part proved to make the stomach bitter because determined infidels would make its proclamation unpleasant. And besides, the consequence of not knowing God and not obeying the gospel is heart-rending, even if it is just. The sad thing about this is for the Christians who are sealed, they're going to be all right. Something better's out there. For the others, it's not that good. They're going to have to suffer through all of these judgmental turmoil. The sad thing about that is that so are these Christians. They're going to have to go through the same thing that everybody else in the world's going to go through. And they did. But if they lost their life, they had a place in heaven. The bitter part is thinking about those that don't. Sad commentary. John is not given the book, but instead he is told to take it. This distinction emphasizes his commitment to undertake the responsibility of recording and presenting God's message. So he took that responsibility. He's going to do it. He took it and he ate it. Over in Ezekiel 2, going down to verse 8, it says, "Now you, son of man, listen to what I am speaking to you. Do not be rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I am giving you." Then I looked, and behold, a hand was extended to me, and lo, a scroll was in it. And he spread it out for me. It was written on the front and the back, and the writing on it were lamentations, mournings, and woes. Front and back denotes completeness here in Ezekiel. And he's given this that was written, this scroll, and he was to consume it in essence. In Ezekiel 3, starting there in verse 1, it says, "Then he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find, eat this scroll, and go speak to the house of Israel." So I opened my mouth, and he fed me this scroll. And he said to me, "Son of man, feed your stomach and fill your body with this scroll, which I am going to give you." Then I ate it, and it was sweet as honey in my mouth. So the people would have understood this illustration of the consuming of the little book or the scroll. As Jeremiah and Ezekiel, John eats the book to signify his acceptance of his responsibility. And this makes the message a part of himself. Again, the scroll was bitter because it contained some bad news. The church was going to suffer through this persecution. Those that were not Christians, it's going to be worse. It was also bitter for John to prophesy of the destruction that would befall the wicked world. And it's as true today as it is back when this was written and given to John. The scroll was sweet. The church would ultimately triumph over Rome, just as Daniel had foretold. The eternal kingdom of God would sweep away all the kingdoms of this world. And in the gospel, that was a reality and is currently a reality. In verse 11, it tells us that John would prophesy about many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. This was not just for a few. This was for all, every person out there in the world. These are the same categories, kings and tribes, from which the saints were purchased back in chapter 5 and verse 9, where it says, and they sang a new song saying, worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased of God with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. The gospel was taken to the world. And that's what he's bringing to light. This language in verse 11 talks about peoples and nations, fit with the notion that the book was largely about the single nation of Rome. But the gospel is not. It's for Rome and every place else. The Roman Empire, though, was composed of peoples from many nations, tongues, and kings. It gives a listing there of the various places that they had conquered. They got so big that they could not even control what was going on in the outskirt lands of Rome. That list is made up of many people and nations and tongues and kings. So a lot of people that was under their control. They were going to deal with this. So when we think about the little scroll, someone realized the cost of sacrifice involved with submitting to God's. They turned their back on the teaching of it. The teaching's difficult part of it. But God has given them a great encouragement that God's with them. God knows what's going on, and God's going to deal with it. If the Lord's willing, next Wednesday evening, we will continue our study into chapter 11 and get down to the seventh trumpet. And we'll begin there next time.